All right, so today we're going to start off with a Class A CDL pre-trip. This is for testing purposes. So we're going to go through like you'd be required to do for your CDL Class A test. We're going to start off this inspection with the in-cab of the vehicle first. Then we'll be working our way to the exterior, primarily focusing on just the driver's side, because for testing purposes, it's assumed that if you can inspect everything verbally on the driver's side, then you'd be able to inspect it the same way on the passenger side. So only going to be inspecting unique items on the passenger side on the exterior of the vehicle. So we'll hop on in the truck and we'll get started. So as I get in the vehicle, I'm entering the vehicle with 3 points of contact, looking, holding, and stepping into the vehicle. I'll be entering into the vehicle. I have the keys in my hand. Okay, and we can go ahead and start into the vehicle here. First thing I'm going to do is inspect my seat belt. My seat belt is not cracked, frayed, or damaged. It seems to be properly latching and unlatching. We go ahead and just leave that latched for the continuation of this inspection. So the next thing I'm doing, I'm making sure I want both my brakes set and the vehicle is now in neutral. I'm going to perform a safe start on this vehicle. So brakes are both set, vehicle is in neutral, and my clutch is depressed. Ignition is in the on position, and I'll start the vehicle. So I've done a safe start on the vehicle. Now the vehicle is started and the gauges have all settled. All my lights, emergency lights, ABS, all that went on and back off, so I know those work properly. On the dash, I'm going to be inspecting to make sure my water temperature is rising and working properly. I have oil pressure, it is rising or has risen and is working properly. My voltmeter is reading 13.9 volts, showing that it is charging. Then I'm going to come over here, I have enough fuel for the trip. And then I have both my primary and secondary air gauges, which are showing that they are charging and at proper operating level. Now, before I leave the dash, I'm going to start checking my indicator lights. My left turn signal works, my right turn signal works, my four-way flashers work. Then I'm going to turn my headlights on, my flashers off, checking to make sure my high beam indicator works and shuts off. Now, as I work my way away from the center of the dash here, I'm into the horn. The horn, you have your city horn and your highway horn are both working properly. Now I'm checking my mirrors, making sure they're properly adjusted for me and don't appear to be cracked, broken, or damaged. If I need to adjust them, I would adjust them at this time. Then I'm coming to my windshield. My windshield is free of obstructions, appears to be properly mounted and secured. I don't see anything obscuring the driver's vision. My windshield wipers are functioning properly and spraying fluid. As I come over here, I'm circling around. I'm going to check my heater and defroster. It's on floor and defrost. I'm going to physically feel that it is actually moving warm air on both top and bottom. It is working properly. So we're checking the fire extinguisher, make sure it's fully charged and in proper date. Then we have our 3 reflective triangles and a minimum of 6 fuses in all of our paperwork, registration, insurance in this pouch here. So the next portion of the in-cab is going to be our brake test. Our brake test, this has to be performed verbatim. The numbers and timing on this are very critical. This is the pass-fail portion of the pre-trip. Now you can miss too many items and still fail your pre-trip, but if you fail to do this, even if you get everything else 100% right, you will auto-fail right here. So pre-trip inspection, brake test is very critical. So the next thing we're going to do is both our brakes are set. We're going to turn the vehicle off, back into the on position, so all of our accessories will work and our alarms. We're going to release both of our brakes. I'm going to go ahead and turn the heater off just so it doesn't make a lot of noise. We're releasing for both of our brakes and letting the air settle out. Once that has happened, then I'm going to have a timer and I will start a timer for 1 minute. In 1 minute, I cannot lose more than 4 psi of pressure while holding the brakes down. So I've held my brakes down, the brake air pressure has settled and stabilized. I'm going to start. For 1 minute, I cannot lose more than 4 psi in a Class A combination vehicle. And we'll hold it for the entire 1 minute using a timer, not counting, because if you go for 48 seconds, you will fail. It has to be for the full 1 minute. And as I'm doing this, I'm watching my gauges and watching for no more than 4 psi of pressure drop. So our 1 minute timer has gone off. We have not lost more than 4 psi of pressure with both our spring brakes released and our pedal depressed. Now we're going to continue on to the next section, which is our low air alarm audible visual alarm has to come on at or before 55 psi. So I'm going to pump down the brakes. So in this case, at about 60 psi, a little bit before, our low air pressure alarm, audible and visual, has come on, indicating that we are starting to lose air pressure. Now what we're going to do is we're going to continue to pump this down, and somewhere between 20 and 45 psi, both of our spring brakes need to apply and set. Okay, so both of our spring brakes have applied at about 30 psi on the primary and about 40 psi on the secondary. Now we're going to restart the vehicle with another safe start. So our brakes are already set. We're going to recheck that we're in neutral. We're going to depress the clutch and start the vehicle. Now what we're going to do is we're building air pressure up, and somewhere between 120 and 145 our air governor should cut out. For this maneuver, I usually roll my window down slightly just so I can hear that air governor cutting off. It's going to be that psh noise that you usually hear on trucks. That's making sure that our vehicle isn't going to overpressurize. For this, I usually high idle around 1,000, 1,100 RPMs just to allow that air pressure to build up faster. So we're getting close to governor cutout, so I'm going to listen. We're about 120 psi on our primary tank right now and just over 100 on our secondary. There we go. At about 125 psi, our air governor has activated, and now we know our brake test has been successful. The last components we're going to check in here before we get out of the cab are going to be to make sure that our spring brakes are working properly. So either one, I'll test one at a time. I'm going to release my trailer brakes first. I'm going to put the truck into a first or a second gear, slowly release the clutch just to see I see the RPMs either slightly lug or slow to indicate that they are set. Okay, so on that, we know that our tractor brakes are working properly. Now I'm going to do the opposite. Now I'm releasing just my trailer brakes are set and my tractor brakes are now released. And I'm going to check and making sure our trailer brakes are also working. Okay, so our trailer didn't move, our truck didn't move. We know that both parking brake systems are working. The last step we're going to do is we're going to release both our tractor and our trailer brake. We'll be pulling forward about 5 miles per hour or 15 feet, activating our service brake and making sure that our vehicle doesn't pull left or right. So pulling forward, we'll get some speed up, usually around, like I said, 5 miles per hour. Clutch in, depress the brake steadily, making sure the vehicle doesn't pull to the left or the right, indicating our service brakes are within adjustment. Now, I will set both my brakes, roll my window back up, and we will continue with the exterior vehicle inspection. Again, starting with the front of the vehicle, the engine compartment, primarily focusing on just the driver's side and only unique items on the passenger side. So now I'm to the exterior of the vehicle inspection. My keys are in my possession and in my pocket. Then what I'm going to do is starting with the front of the vehicle and the engine compartment without the vehicle running and it is secured and both brakes are set. I'm going to start from the top down, inside out, left to right, kind of like you're reading a book. So starting with the top of this vehicle, I have 5 amber in color marker lights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. Going down to the windshield, again, it is clear of obstructions, it's not cracked, broken, or damaged, appears to be properly mounted and secured. I have 2 windshield wipers, which are both appear to be properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or damaged. Moving down, I have 4 amber in color turn signal lights and running lights that are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I have 2 clear in color headlights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. Down here, I have an inspection under the vehicle. I don't see any leaks or puddles indicating that there might be a leak of the engine, and the vehicle is not listing left or right, indicating a possible suspension issue. Now I'm going to open the hood, go to the passenger side of the engine compartment, focus on just the unique items on that side, and then predominantly start working down just the driver's side for all the rest. Now onto the passenger side of the vehicle. I'm starting from the top down, inside out, left to right. I'm going to focus on components as they work together. So starting up here on the top, I'll be looking at the coolant reservoir. The coolant reservoir is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and is at proper operating level. It is also holds a fluid, so it is not leaking. Then from the coolant reservoir, I've got all my hoses and lines in general. I'm inspecting to make sure they're not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and don't appear to be leaking. From there, my coolant reservoir will go to my water pump. My water pump is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and not leaking. It is a belt-driven item, so there cannot be more than 3/4 inch of play on the belt. The belt is also not frayed, cut, or damaged. From there, I'm going to go into my exhaust system. My exhaust system, looking down the entirety of it, is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, doesn't appear to be leaking. How I would check for that is I'm looking for long soot trails, black soot trails indicating it might be leaking. From there, I will now continue on to the driver's side. Now again, there are several other components I would be looking at for testing purposes. We're inspecting it verbally, so we're not going to go into a lot of in-depth on this, but I am inspecting all the other components just like I would be on the driver's side. So now, on to the driver's side. For more in-depth on this side, again, I have all my hoses and lines are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and don't appear to be leaking. First thing I'm going to come to, again, top down, inside out. My alternator. My alternator is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. All the wires going to it are properly mounted and secured. I don't see any cuts or frays. It is a belt-driven item. It is no more than 3/4 inch of play on the belt on the alternator. From there, I will be working my way down the engine. My dipstick, I would pull it out, wipe it off, reinsert it, pull it back out, and make sure this engine is at proper operating level for oil. On this particular engine, towards the back, I have my air compressor and my power steering pump. They are both gear-driven items. They are both not leaking, not cracked, broken, or damaged, and appear to be properly mounted and secured. Working my way back out. My steering column is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and no excessive play. Also, if my U-joints accepted it, I would make sure they are properly greased. Then I have my power steering reservoir. It again is at proper operating level. It is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and not leaking. My hoses and lines going to and from my power steering reservoir to my pump are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and not leaking. My power steering box, my gearbox, is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and doesn't appear to be leaking. I have my 3-component steering system, my pitman arm, my drag link, and my upper control arm, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured to each other with castellated nuts and cotter keys present. They also appear to be properly greased. That concludes my steering system. Now before I work my way out, I'm going to go back to the frame and my rest of my suspension. My frame is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there are no illegal welds, and there's no holes larger than 3/4 inch that do not have a bolt present. Moving on from my frame, I have my spring hangers, both front and rear, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and properly greased if need be. From there, I have my leaf springs. My leaf springs are not cracked, broken, or damaged, and are not scissoring or misalignment to them. My U-bolts are properly mounted and secured, and there's no shiny metal or rust trails in the saddle indicating they might be loose. From there, I have my shock absorber. My shock absorber is properly mounted both top and bottom. It's not cracked, broken, or damaged. It holds a fluid, so it is not leaking. Now I've concluded my suspension components on the front of this vehicle. Now I'm going to be working out into my braking components. My brake line is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and doesn't appear to be leaking. My brake can is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured with a belly band present and is not leaking. I have my slack adjuster and my push rod. My slack adjuster and push rod are held together with a pin and cotter key, and there cannot be more than 1 inch of play on my push rod with my brakes released. Then into the linings and drums and linings of this vehicle, the braking system. On my drums and linings, they're not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I see no oil indicating a possible oil leak on the hub seal, and I also am going to be looking for excessive wear. They are not excessively worn. So on to the tires. There's no abrasions, bulges, and cuts. on the sidewalls or the tops. They are evenly worn, and there's a minimum of 4 seconds of tread depth. Moving to the exterior of the tire and the rim, I have a rim which is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there are no illegal welds. All the lug nuts are present. There are no shiny metal or rust trails indicating they may be loose. My hub seal is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. It is not leaking and is at proper operating level. Lastly, on the front of this vehicle, I'm going to have my valve stem. My valve stem is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, not leaking, has a valve cap present. I would be using an air pressure gauge to make sure this tire is at proper operating pressure. Now, we'll be continuing down the side of the vehicle. First, I'm going to be starting with the door. The door opens and closes properly and has a weather stripping present. The mirror is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or damaged. My fuel tank is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured with belly bands and rubberized gaskets. It is also not leaking. My fuel cap is properly mounted and secured. It is not leaking. It has a safety chain and a rubberized gasket. My steps and my catwalk are free of debris, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or damaged. Moving to the rear of this vehicle. The cab, my windows are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I have my reflective tape, white in color, on the rear corners of this cab, not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I have one clear in color working light, which is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. Moving on to my air and electrical. My air lines are hard mounted to the truck and glad hand mounts to the trailer. They're not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and I hear no leaks. My electrical line is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured to the truck and the trailer with the safety latch present and engaged. It is also, my lines are not rubbing or dragging on the catwalk. In the middle here, I have my drive shaft. My drive shaft is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, properly greased, and is not bent. Moving on to the suspension components. Starting with the rear suspension components. My front spring hanger is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and properly greased if need be. From there I have a spring. In this case it is a mono spring, so it is not worried about scissoring, but it is still not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I have my U-bolts back here. My U-bolts holding the axle to the spring are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there's no shiny metal or rust trails on the saddle. My shock absorber is not cracked, broken, or damaged. It is properly mounted and secured both top and bottom. It holds the fluid so it is not leaking. Back here I have my airbags. My airbags are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there are no leaks, audible leaks, including the air lines. All my air lines and hoses back here are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and I don't hear any leaks. My torsion bar is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured to both the axle and the frame. Moving from there, I'm going back and now into my braking system. My air lines to my brake cans are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and are not leaking. My brake cans are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured with 2 belly bands on these rear cans. There's my slack adjusters and push rods are not cracked, broken, or damaged. They're properly mounted to each other with a pin and a cotter key, and there's no more than 1 inch of play with the brakes released. Going into my drums and linings. My drums and linings on the rear of this vehicle are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and they're not excessively worn. There is also no grease or oils indicating there might be an interior leak. Moving on. Now I'm into my tires and rims. I have 2 tires in the dual tire system. Inside, outside, inside, and outsides of my sidewalls are not cracked, broken, or damaged. There's no abrasions, bulges, and cuts. They're evenly worn, and on the rear tires, there's no less than 2 30-seconds of tread depth. Then, in the middle of my bud spacing on bud style wheels, the rims are touching, and there's no debris in between the tires. Moving out to the outside again. My rim is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. There's no illegal welds. All my lug nuts are present. I have no shiny metal or rust trails to indicate that they might be loose. My axle seal in this case is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and doesn't appear to be leaking. And lastly, my valve stem is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, has a valve stem cap present, and is not leaking. And I would be checking on both tires for that same thing. Now, we're going to continue on down. I'm not going to go in depth into inspecting this verbally because it is assumed that if you demonstrate how to inspect this axle, you would know how to inspect this axle also, since they are the same. Now, on the rear of the vehicle, we have 100% DOT reflective tape on the mud flaps or reflectors on the rear cross member. We have our mud flaps, which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or damaged. We have 2 red in color tail lights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged. And we have 2 white in color lights, which are my reverse light and my license plate light. My license plate also is not cracked, broken, or damaged and appears to be properly mounted and secured. Moving up from there, we're going to go into the coupling system on the truck to the trailer. The apron is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured to the trailer. The skid plate, which is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. There is no air gap between the apron and the skid plate, and they appear to be properly greased. My safety release handle, the release handle is properly stowed for travel. My pivot pin is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and has a pin and a cotter key holding it in place. This is a sliding fifth wheel, so my sliding fifth wheel mount is properly mounted and secured with all the bolts present. My pin for the locking mechanism on the sliding fifth wheel is fully engaged and ready for travel. Lastly, in the inside here, I would be inspecting the inside for my kingpin and my locking jaw, which is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured to each other. Lastly, on the inside here, I see my kingpin and my locking jaw securely fastened around it. Neither one are cracked, broken, or damaged and appear to be properly mounted and secured. Now, to the front of the trailer. The trailer has 2 amber in color marker lights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, appear to be properly mounted and secured. I have all my rivets appear to be in place, no excessive missing rivets or excessive damage to the front of the trailer. My glad hands and my electrical mounts are properly mounted and secured to the trailer. I hear no leaks on the air side. Going down the side of the trailer, I have a minimum of 50% DOT reflective tape on the side of this trailer. On the side of the trailer, I have an amber color marker light on the top in the middle and an amber turn signal on the bottom in the middle. Both are not cracked, broken, or damaged and appear to be properly mounted and secured. Coming to my landing gear. My landing gear is fully retracted for travel, not cracked, broken, or damaged, and properly mounted and secured. My landing gear handle is properly stowed for travel. I have a minimum gap, a proper gap between my truck and my trailer. Since it's a sliding fifth wheel, I must check my proper gap between my landing gear and the truck. Coming down the side of the trailer, as I come down the side of the trailer, I'm checking my cross members, making sure my cross members are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. Also, I'm checking for holes. There are no holes in my trailer floor. Working my way to the back. Now I'm going to be at the rear of this trailer, and I'm checking my rear suspension and all the rear components. So, starting with this being a spring suspension, I have my front spring hangers, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. My torsion bar is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. My springs are leaf springs, are not scissoring, don't appear to be cracked, broken, or damaged, and properly mounted and secured with my U-bolts. My U-bolts are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and have no shiny metal on the saddles indicating they may be loose. From there, I'm going to go into my braking components. This trailer is not equipped with airbags or shock absorbers, so you don't have to talk about them. So now into my braking components. My air lines are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and are not leaking. My brake cans are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured with 2 belly bands and don't appear to be leaking. My slack adjuster and my push rods are secured to each other with a pin and a cotter key and are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there cannot be more than 1 inch of play with the brakes released in my push rod. Then into my drums and linings. My drums and linings are not cracked, broken, or damaged. They're properly mounted and secured, and they're not excessively worn. Now, going into my tires, my inside, my outside, my inside, and my outside are not, there's no abrasions, bulges, or cuts. They're evenly worn, and there's a minimum of 2 30 seconds of tread depth on the rear trailer tires. In the bud spacing, I'm checking for my bud spacing to be free of debris, and then my bud style wheels are touching and there's no air gap. Moving to the outside. The outside of my tires, there's no abrasions, bulges, and cuts again. On the inside, outside, inside, outside. And now to my rims. My rims are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and there's no illegal welds. That being said, now I'm on to my lug nuts. I'm checking all my lug nuts. There are no shiny metal or rust trail indicating they might be loose. My axle seal is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, doesn't appear to be leaking, and is at proper operating level. I would check both my valve stems to make sure they're not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, and are not leaking. They have a valve cap present. I would be checking all my tires again with an air pressure gauge to make sure they're at proper operating pressure. Moving on, again, it was assumed that if I can inspect this axle the same way, I'd be inspecting that axle the same way. So we'll continue on. Now, I've got a red in color marker light, not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured, with a mud flap present, not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. Moving on to the rear of the vehicle. On this vehicle, I will start again from the top down, inside out. I have 5 red in color marker lights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. My door is properly secured and stowed for travel, and it doesn't appear to be cracked, broken, or damaged. This vehicle has a lift gate present. The lift gate is properly stowed for travel in the full and upright position and chained for safety. Then I have 100% DOT reflective tape on the rear of this vehicle. So on the back of this vehicle, there are 4 red in color taillights, which are not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. I also have a white in color license plate light, which is not cracked, broken, or damaged, properly mounted and secured. 100% DOT tape on the rear bumper of this vehicle. Now, I'll be moving on to the passenger side and inspecting just the unique items. On this particular vehicle, the unique items would be, on the trailer, I have a battery box, appears to be properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or damaged. And lastly, on the passenger side of the truck, the unique item would be the exhaust stack. The exhaust stack is not cracked, broken, or damaged. It is properly mounted and secured, and there are no soot trails indicating it might be loose or leaking. Now, the last part and the last component of this pre-trip inspection is going to be an exterior vehicle light operations check. So what I'll do is I'm going to have to get in the vehicle. Without the vehicle running, I'm going to turn on the lights. I would tell the examiner to please check the front of the vehicle, and I'm going to test my left blinker, and I will tell him what I want him to check. My left blinker, my right blinker, my 4-way flashers, and my high and low beam indicators. Then I will tell him to move to the rear of the vehicle. As he goes to the rear of the vehicle, I will tell him to check all my marker lights on the way back. Once he gets to the rear of the vehicle, I will again instruct him to check my left blinker, my right blinker, my 4-way flashers, and my brake lights. Then that would conclude my pre-trip inspection. Before you say you are complete, you can always go back if you remember anything. You can go backwards at any time during this inspection. If you're at the rear of the vehicle and you realize, oops, I forgot to check my slack adjusters and my front axle, you can tell your examiner, oh, by the way, on the front of the vehicle, I would also check my slack adjusters, and this is how I would do it. You can also, on your brake test, this is very critical to also remember, during your brake test, if you mess up on a component or a step on your brake test when you're inside the cab, you can catch that. And as long as you tell the examiner, oops, I screwed up, I want to restart my brake test and start over from square one, you can do that until you get it correct. But remember, you have to be the one to catch it. If the examiner, after the fact, tells you you messed up and you failed, you can't go back and fix it. As long as you're the one who tells it and catches it, you can keep doing that until you get it correct. Same with everything else in this vehicle. When you're satisfied and you stop and pause for just a second and think, did I get everything? Yes, I did. Then let them know you're complete with your pre-trip. Thank you for watching, and I hope this helps.